to the Success is Subjective podcast series brought to you by collegealternative.org, presented by Lilly Consulting. I'm your host, Joanna Lilly. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing Cody. Jesse is a Cambridge, Mass. Native, currently living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and is the founder of Hike the Good Hike, a movement and a nonprofit in the making. Over the last several years, he's used his experience of finding mental health and healing in the outdoors as the pillar of this organization. As someone who battled insecurity, depression, and suicidal thoughts for most of his life, this movement is near and dear to his heart. Nature came and found Jesse and pulled him out of the darkness. He finally calmed the voices in his head that he spent a lifetime battling and learned to engage with them from a thoughtful and grounded place. 7 years and roughly 9,000 miles of the trail later, he embraces life fully and feels deeply aligned with his purpose. In 2022, as a nonprofit, Jesse and Hike the Good Hike will launch, drumroll please, the Hiking the Good Hike with Cody podcast. Continue to use ongoing hiking treks to raise awareness and expand partnerships with mental health organizations and wilderness therapy programs to help their growth. Let's not wait any longer. Here's Jesse. All right, Jesse, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
It's not 3:45 in the morning.
No, this feels good.
This is good.
I've already had some coffee. I'm relaxing. This is perfect.
Well, let's just dive in. Why don't you actually... I really don't know much about your story other than kind of the work that you're doing right now. So I'm really eager to hear kind of the lead up to the work that you're doing. So Why don't you tell the listeners, where did you grow up and what was the messaging that you were kind of hearing about the post-secondary education or college and kind of post-secondary life?
Yeah, so I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, majority of my life there, other than about 5.5 years living in New York City. Growing up in a really great family, a lot of love and support. My mom, my dad, they separated when I was young, but they did it right. They stayed as friends and made sure myself and my brothers were in a good position, and always knew that we had a lot of love, even though we had 2 houses. I had a fantastic and still have a fantastic stepfather who's been in my life since I was 5. So, kind of growing up, when it came to education, work hard, hit the books, it was a little different. I'm 47, I'll be 48 soon. So I grew up, my dad was a teacher. So when you grow up with a teacher, as a father, he puts a lot of pressure on you to make sure you're hitting the books. We even had to, when we slipped up, we had to sit at a desk in the living room and do our homework every night, and he had to review it. So there was no getting away. We're cutting corners in my household. But the other thing about myself and my brother Scott, we were elite athletes. So we weren't just students, but we were student athletes. I came from a long line of runners in my family, my mom's side. All my uncles were really successful runners. My brother was an extremely successful runner who's older than me, and you could kind of see at an early age with me that I was going to go the same direction and follow in the footsteps. So, there was a lot of attention to do well in school. And, I wasn't the best of students. Probably, we're going to be here talking about mental health. I would say that my focus wasn't really great because, there's a lot of things going on in my head at even an early age, I think that, played a part in that. But, as a student athlete, I was successful. I ended up being really successful in high school as a runner. I was a 7-time state champion, ended up being the fastest high school miler in the United States my senior year, and got a full scholarship to Providence College for my running. And, even though I had all that success in my life through elementary school and into high school, and really anybody from the outside looking in didn't see the things that I was struggling with, I was really good at hiding it. I think as a kid, you learn how to cover up things pretty well and keep what's really going on from your parents. Certain things would leak out. I'm sure my folks could look back and see my insecurities show at times. I talk often about these races that I won. For all these races that I won, really what stuck with me most were the races that I lost, and how that affected me and how I felt like a failure and how I felt like I was letting everybody down if I didn't win a race. And that was kind of how I felt with a lot of things in life. I was always nervous that I was going to let people down. And so, getting into Providence College, that's kind of where really things started to unravel for me. You leave the nest, right? So, my dad, there's that desk in the living room that's gone. I'm a couple states away from Massachusetts now. And, the coach that had been with you since you were 13 years old is no longer your coach. You're dealing with a coach that's a Division I coach that, to them, they're fantastic coaches, but when it comes to Division I athletics, it's a business. Their business is to win titles. And so my support system wasn't around me anymore. And because of that, really, I unraveled. And not just my lack of focus when it came to academics, but I really just started having this understanding that I was so afraid of failure that I kind of just got to this point where I let myself go. And it was within 6 months that I actually flunked out of college and lost my scholarship to Providence. Certainly I had that spiraling effect of what was going on with me continued to grow and continued to have me literally falling down into a deeper and darker hole that would result in a lifetime, really, of difficult things for me, a lot of insecurity issues, a lot of depression. When it was all said and done, I ended up just getting into the bar business, doing a job that, as long as you showed up and made sure the money was in the safe, it would be hard to lose your job. And those would kind of going in a career like that was, to me, was like, well, I can't really fail here, so I can't let anybody down. There's a lot in between here, but I'm trying to keep it short for you and the audience. But even being in that business and really kind of the way that I dealt with the things that I was going through, I really started exhibiting a lot of narcissistic behavior, particularly towards women that I dated in my life. And this basket of eggs, rotten eggs is probably the best way to put it, really just started filling up for me, and I am your classic example of a man throughout all these years who struggled, never could find the courage to speak up and say I needed help. Even though I wasn't taught this by my parents, my dad, my stepdad, my coach, my brother, still, because society and what you hear, you kind of think as a man, you should be able to fix these problems on your own, that you're weak. If you ask for help, you're weak. If you show emotion, you're weak. If you really truly tell people what's going on in your mind. And, that spiraling hole took me to a place where I really started, more and more thinking about not wanting to be here, and really confronting suicidal thoughts. I can't really remember the first time I had them, but I certainly can remember being, even at a young age, thinking to myself at times, I wish I wasn't here anymore. Probably in those moments, I didn't think those were suicidal thoughts, but they are, they're at least the beginnings of, that development of thinking about what it would be like to not be here, which would lead to you thinking about how you could take your life. And in the same way, all these things are building up over the years. Those thoughts were building up as well. So, it was probably my, mid 30s where things were really, really, hitting the wall for me at their worst. More and more thinking about suicide became a daily routine for me. The beauty of my life is that I have a great family and a lot of great friends. And a lot of the times that I would think about those things, I would have this, tug of war argument in my head, saying you can't do this, like I would have these visions of how that would affect my mom, or, as I got older, how that would affect my nephew and niece. I would have these visions of my brother telling my nephew and niece, your uncle's gone, and then trying to explain that. Like, so I'd have these like back and forth where I didn't want to be here, but man, I was just like, I felt so guilty for having those type of thoughts. So, we go down this long road of, mid 30s up. And then I had like one of the luckiest moments in my life, which most people probably would think doesn't sound so lucky, but I turned 40. And, that's an age that's older. It's kind of like definitely not over the hill, but, you certainly look at it and go, man, 40 years, and for me, I was really actually looking at it like, what have you done with your life? You've lived a life with a lot of pain. You live a life with a lot of manipulation. You've lived a life with a lot of lying. You've lived a life where you've put a lot of your pain on others, specifically that women that I had relationships with. And going into this party, this 40th birthday, I actually thought to myself, this most likely is going to be your last birthday, you know? And in a weird way, I was like, well, so let's make it let's make it a great party. Let's make this a big bash. You know, you think really weird ways when you think, you know, you have suicidal thoughts. You know, let's celebrate because this is probably the last time you'll celebrate. But I'm glad I had that decision. I'm glad people got behind having a big party, because what happened is when I had this party, it was huge, man. I had a ton of friends, and a lot of my family ended up being 50, 60 plus people. And there was this moment at that party where I was literally just standing in the middle of everyone, and I just felt this overwhelming feeling of love. You know, I was just looking around and seeing all this love in my life. And I just kind of thought to myself, wow, man, like, for a person that has so much good in their life, how is it that you want to be gone? And then I thought off of that, you know, you really haven't given yourself a chance. Like, you haven't asked for help. You haven't sought therapy. You haven't just talked to someone and say, I'm not in a good place and I don't know how to change this. And so, you know, that guilt hit me again. I remember giving a speech to thank everybody, and it might have seemed like I was humbled, but it was more like I was grieving on the inside. I felt so guilty that, you know, there were times that I was close to taking my life, and I would have done that to those people. And here I was thinking this could be my last party. And so, you know, when the party was over and I had a few days to really kind of sit on that and process it, which at that point I didn't even know what processing meant. But now I can look back because, you know, I live in New Mexico. You learn a lot about this kind of stuff out here. Processing is a key part of life in New Mexico. You know, I just made this decision that I wanted to live. You know, I didn't know how that looked. I didn't know what steps I was going to take. Even having understanding that I wanted to live and figure out a way to actually live a life that was worth living, I still was like, I'm not ready to ask for help. I'm not ready to speak this out to the world. So I'm hoping I can find something that, you know, will at least lead me in a direction of finding the ability and the courage to speak up and seek help and let people know in my life what's going on. And so as I started like researching what it is that I could do to restart my life, I literally Googled how to restart your life at 40. That's something that I actually put in Google and thought maybe the answers are there. And funny enough, they were, but not in the way you would think. You know, I've
definitely I've typed stuff like that
right,
before.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that popped up was an ad that said it was something like $3,000 in 30-day program. We can change your life. And I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, maybe if I don't find something else, I'll spend the $3,000 and in 30 days, I'll be a new man. But I didn't do that. And I scrolled for a while, and I scrolled for some days, and I kept, you know, thinking things over and looking at my options. And I was terrified because here I am at 40 and I've been in the bar business now for 17, 18 years. And like, how do you do this? And as I was asking those questions and scrolling, I came across an article that Robert Redford was making Bill Bryson's book, A Walk in the Woods, into a movie. And Bill Bryson's book, A Walk in the Woods, is a book about hiking the Appalachian Trail. And lucky enough, a friend of mine had given me that book in my early 20s, and I read it, and I just remembered liking it. And I said, oh, I remember that book. It's about adventure. There's inspiration. There's all kinds of good stuff. I could use a little inspiration. Why don't I go pick this book back up and give it a reread? And so I did. You know, that literally after I saw that afternoon, I went and picked the book up. That night I opened it up and I started reading. You know, it's Bryson's book about his own experiences on the Appalachian Trail. He kind of mixes in some fiction and mixes in, you know, some of his truth about hiking along the AT. But long story short, you know, when he discovered the Appalachian Trail, it was actually way beyond his backyard in his house in New Hampshire. He saw hikers. And so one day he wanted to go out and see what this was all about, why people kept walking by through the woods behind his house. And, you know, when he got up to, you know, he walked through the yard and through the bush and through the trees, and he came to that trail, and there he saw a wooden sign that said, you know, footpath, you know, Georgia, X amount of miles that way, Maine, X amount of miles that way, the Appalachian Trail. And, you know, from there, he was really curious, and in his own way, he went and did some research in the same way I researched how to stop my life at 40. And when he discovered what this trail was all about and the beauty of it and why people did it, he had this kind of epiphany about himself where he at that time was really successful. I mean, he was an established author, he was a professor, he had a family, but he felt like there were still some questions in life that he needed answers to. And so when I read that, I was really struck by that. One, here's this book coming back into my life, and two, here's someone who seems to have an incredible life, but still has some things that he needs to work on and figure out and find some answers for. And so, even though this was the craziest decision ever in my life, a guy that's only lived in a city his whole entire life, I felt, well, if he'd had some questions needed answered, I do too. So maybe hiking 2,200 miles will help me find some answers. Sounds easy enough. But I made this decision, as I said, as a man who had never been hiking. I didn't have a whole lot of wilderness experience, but I just felt like if I think so often about taking my own life, maybe it's the craziest thing that you've ever done to help you find life. And, it took a few months to do some research and understand what I was getting myself into. It certainly was some crazy conversations with family and friends to let them know what I was doing. I still didn't tell them everything that was going on, but I told them just enough. I really made a point to my mom and my dad that in the same way Bryson talks about it, I said, I feel incomplete. I feel like I haven't done much with my life, and I need to go figure out how I can live the rest of my life doing something that is meaningful. And they were great about it. They said, this is a crazy decision, but if this is what you need, we support you. We love you. Start walking. And, after those few months of preparing myself, I took an Amtrak train down to Georgia. A day and a half later, I'm standing on the top of Springer Mountain, and I turned around and I started my walk to Maine. And it took me 6 months, but I became a thru hiker of the Appalachian Trail. And, there's a lot, certainly from that day in Georgia to the day in Maine, to fill in the gaps, to really, truly like let you know what that did for me. But I'm here talking to you, so spoiler alert. I found my way to really, 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 truly love life and love what I do in life. And I found a passion and a calling. And I make a point to always live my life driven by empathy. And, I found the courage to speak up and talk about why I hiked the Appalachian Trail, and to tell people where my head was at, and talk to my parents, and I, started seeing a therapist, all the good things that come with, trying to grab your life by the horns and live the best life you can. So, yeah, I don't know if you have questions, but I'm sure that gives you a pretty good chunk of where, how I got to this organization, Hike the Good Hike.
Yeah, well, actually, that's a really good point. So I was just going to say quickly that it's one thing to start through hiking. It's another thing to finish, right? I've actually had a couple other guests on the podcast who have attempted or have actually completed through hikes on either the PCT or the AT. But to your point, everybody's reason for why and for, like where that marker for completing this experience or this chapter in their life. It's a significant, you have to be so physically and mentally driven to complete that. And like you said, like there's so much that you could probably, like we could spend an entire podcast just talking about like, the lessons learned from that through hike. But you hit the nail on the head by kind of cluing our listeners in by saying this became your calling, right? Now you've got this organization. So, fill us in though for the last, almost 8 years, right? Leading up to that hike and like how you ended up doing what you're doing, because we need to know what it is specifically you're doing, and like anything else in between that kind of really manifested you in this place where you are in your life, loving life, right? And asking for help and processing and doing all of the therapeutic work that really like I don't want to say avoided, but you just kind of neglected for almost 20 years, right? So now it's like, oh my, I just picture this like flower that's like ready, right? Like fully in bloom.
Yeah.
So what are you doing? What has happened since you got to Maine?
So the thing, there's tons of lessons I can talk about, and but like for me, like, I took this trail on. You truly, like you said, you have to face yourself. You have no way of hiding from the things that you have to confront, right? You've got a lot of time on your hands, and you got a lot of one-on-one with your mind's time on your hands. But, and this is something that's really important in what I'm doing with the organization. And when I talk about it, is like the thing that I realize most about the Appalachian Trail is that, I lived this whole life going through these mental illness issues. And I never changed my environment, right? Like I was a city guy staying in a city, working in the bar industry, which was really bad for the demons that were feeding off of me. And I kept thinking I could make all these changes. But then here I am on this trail where I'm the way that I like to describe it is like my whole life before that, my routine and my environment was chaos, right? And so without even like knowing what I was doing by taking on the AT, I removed myself from my chaos. I changed my routine, which changed the conversation in my head. The conversation was not so much anymore these voices that were dominating me and telling me, you're not worth it. You shouldn't be here. What it actually was they were still trying to do that, but shit was quiet out there. It wasn't chaotic. We were listening to birds. We were listening to wind. We were seeing beauty. And it literally went from arguments and like just wars in my head to conversations. I found myself to a much more grounded place to actually confront these things. And so, as I went through this whole entire 6-month stretch and I had conversations and I obviously worked a lot of things out and I obviously recognized things that I still had to work on, but knew if I could hike 2,200 miles, I have the ability to really, continue to work on things as they come at me. I think for your question, the last day is the most important for that question. When I was in the last couple of miles on Katahdin, I was above the tree line, and you can see even 2 miles away, you can see the peak. You can see people around the famous wooden sign, right? And I've been hiking with a group for a couple of months, and I actually said to them, if you guys don't mind, the last hour or so, I just want to be on my own. I really want to take this in. It's hard for me not to get emotional every time I talk about this, even when I think about it. But as of course, initially my first thought is, you did this, man. You got here, you got to Georgia, and you've actually hiked 2,200 miles. I didn't even mention this, but the first time I ever slept in a tent was night 1 on the Appalachian Trail. Like this was all very new to me. And by the end, it wasn't. But I said, I throughout this hike, I really started recognizing Mother Nature. I really started understanding the universe and signs. It was a very dominant female presence to me. So, I had this conversation with her as I was taking on those last 2 miles. And I said, first of all, I said, thank you, thank you for guiding me here and showing me, even though this was hard, you made me earn every step of this, but you showed me that I can do this. I can live this thing we call life. And then the second thing I said is, and I think the reason that you showed me this is because you didn't show it to me to just say, here you go. Now you have that. You did this for me because now you count on me to pass that on. Like, don't keep it to myself. Spread the word. And so I made a promise. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what it is. I have no clue. But I promise you, I will make this my life, and I will dedicate my life to what you gave me and try to find ways to give it back to the world. Because, it's obvious to all of us that, there's a lot of people that were standing in my same shoes or stood in my same shoes that probably could really use a story like this. And so I promised the trail and Mother Nature and the universe, and I promised myself, we'll find strength and we'll move on, and we don't know what's ahead, but we'll confront it as it comes, and we'll stay true to this promise you've made. Since finishing, it's been a lot of hiking. I've done the Pacific Crest Trail as well. I think right now I'm just over 9,000 miles hiked since the day I stepped off the Springer Mountain 7.5 years ago. And all along, it was early on that I said the words "hike the good hike" on the Appalachian Trail. I actually have one of those Facebook memories where I'm at a video, and it was like a week or two into my trail, and I don't know what was going on in the world. Probably stuff similar to what's going on in the world these days. And I was just saying, hey, everybody, I know it's tough times. Keep your head up, blah, blah, blah. I'm out here doing my thing. I'm moving forward. It's not easy, but I've never been more excited about something in my life. And at the very end, I said, just do what you're doing and hike the good hike. And I was like, man, you were saying that like 2 weeks into the Appalachian Trail. And so when I made the promise, I said, whatever I do, hike the good hike is going to be its mantra. It's going to be a message. It's going to be a mantra. We'll see where we can take it. And in the same way I took this crazy leap and took on this trail, I just believed that things would, I would either manifest things, the universe would show me the way. And that's what's been happening, really. It made a ton of sense to me to really it took me 2 more years. It wasn't until 2017 that I actually said out loud, I was suicidal. And I actually did it on a podcast. The host just said, what is the truest reason? Like, what can you tell us? Why did you hike that trail? And I said it. And then I had to go tell all my family and friends. Well, you put it out to the world. If that was the way it got out there, that's okay. And now you kind of are forced to have those conversations, but they're conversations that need to have. I just started thinking to myself, the important part of the story is not the hike, man. It's cool. It's a great part. But the important part is the mental illness that you were going through. That's what's important. I used to think I want to be a decorated, recognized hiker, a wilderness adventurer, right? But when people ask me now, I say, well, I actually like to be called a mental health advocate that just really likes to hike. And it's the best way for me to continue to get my voice out there. I'm sure people would love to listen to me if I'm on stage or something, but it's a bit cooler when I'm coming to you from the top of a mountain on a 2,500 mile hike. That's appealing. I think, I found something that would truly get people's attention, and the two things go really well together because nature is really good for your mental health. And so here I am now, I made this decision when I went back and I hiked the last 1,300 miles of the PCT last summer, that I started understanding that I wanted some type of organization, something that I could use my hiking, that I could give back, that I could help people struggling with mental illness. I could probably start researching nonprofits and organizations that had programs. And I came across one called the Youth Mental Health Project. And I made this decision. I was like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to these guys and I'm going to let them know I'm hiking 1,300 miles and I'm going to raise money for their program. And I did that. And the director, the first thing she said is, what's the catch? Because she goes, this is the most insane thing I've ever heard. And I said, there's no catch. I said, but this is my story. And really what I want to understand is I believe I have the pillars for an organization. And I just want to see if I use this next hike as a fundraiser, that Hike the Good Hike as an organization that actually has legs and can do something in this world. So I'm working with you guys. Let's partner. I'm going to do this. I'm going to hike 1,300 miles and raise money for you. And, just help me get the word out. And you know what I mean? Let's work really hard to have a great fundraiser. And, when it was all said and done, I ended up raising just over $30,000 for that program. And
wow.
There are two things I thought. One, that's incredible. And just think about what that money can do for the Youth Mental Health Project and who it can help. And then two, Hike the Good Hike could be its own nonprofit. And that's what I needed to see. And so, that's what I've been working on since I returned from the Pacific Crest Trail in September, laying the groundwork to become my own nonprofit. It's already filed. New Mexico recognizes us. The IRS is still kind of coming back and forth, but we're rebranding everything. We're relaunching everything Hike the Good Hike that used to be just kind of me and my story, and has truly been my focus to take a lot of the attention off of me and my story, which is weird to say, but I really want to use the platform. I'm also starting my own podcast this summer. I want to encourage people, and I want to give a space for people to tell their story that are similar to mine, and how nature has truly helped them with their mental illness. And, as we raise donations, we're focused on helping more programs throughout the country, ones that specifically use wilderness therapy. And then in the big picture, when we really look, 2-3 year plan is we can raise more money. We want to create scholarships for programs like that for people that are really struggling and think to themselves, I've never stepped into nature, and maybe this is something that can help me. And I want to make that easier for people that need help. So Hike the Good Hike is just really going to be a place that we're going to do everything we can to really just give people an opportunity to see if something different in terms of hiking. It doesn't even have to be hiking. It can be anything in nature. I talk that often. Hiking in quotations, hiking for me. But I mean, I encourage people just to head out to a field and lay a blanket down, man, and look up at the sun and just let the wind hit you and listen and have that conversation with yourself, take yourself out of your chaos. Change your environment and see if those conversations are a bit different.
I am like, I don't even know what to say. I am so appreciative for you sharing kind of your journey. I'm also just super jazzed to hear about Hike the Good Hike and kind of where it's headed. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you before we get to the like, hey, how do people connect with you, which we'll make sure we have the like links and whatnot in the show notes, but I'll also ask you here momentarily. I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests, and I'm really kind of curious to hear your response. So the title of this podcast is called Success is Subjective. So here's my loaded question to you. Do you see yourself as successful?
That's brilliant. And I'm so glad you asked this question because I just had this conversation. So here's my answer, right? Someone asked me, like, where do you see this taking you? And a lot of times people ask me, like, it's not a profit, but you might, with all your talking stuff, you might have a lot of wealth. And I said, oh, man, well, I just need what I need. And anything else, I'll probably kick back into the nonprofit. People always get mad. Like my goal initially, and this has changed a bit, but I was like, I'd love to start this nonprofit and not even take a salary. Like maybe I can get paid by talking and stuff like that, but people are like, you're crazy. And I was crazy. That is crazy. I'm starting to realize how much work it is, but I still don't want to take a lot. I'd rather distribute money out to people that can help me and help this grow. And someone said, well, what's wealth to you? Right. And that in the same sense as the question, what's success? And I said, if I had a built out van and I could just drive around the country for a few years talking and really just kind of doing what I need to do to grow Hike the Good Hike, that is as wealthy as I could ever be and ever want to be. I've never been wealthy. You know what I mean? Like life for me has always been a struggle. I've been climbing mountains my whole life before I knew mountains, and so I don't even understand. It's never been my drive as far as financially being wealthy. Like I guess the trail taught me, man, my definition of success and wealth is being alive and really loving life, man. Like I have a heart, and for a long time I didn't think I did. And like I was very judgmental and now I'm not. And like there's just these things about me, man, that I'm like, feels so good. This is success. Like, so for me, like, even when I'm struggling or even like when things aren't going the way that I hope with Hike the Good Hike or something stalls or I have to go a different direction, man, I'm alive. And that to me that's success, because I could have followed through and I didn't, and I get to live the rest of my life and I get to watch my nephew and niece grow up and I get to spend time with people that I just really care about. And I get to be part of Hike the Good Hike. It's weird that you asked because I just had this conversation. I said, really, like when it's all said and done, I just want to be sitting in a rocking chair in a house in New Mexico on the Mesa. And I just want to think to myself, look what you did, and really be able to say, look what you did. And you left your mark. And that's important to me, is just to be able to have a life where I left a mark. And that's success.
And you're totally doing that. I think that is, I'm like, again, I'm just like so excited to be connected and know that Hike the Good Hike exists and that it is taking off. And, again, from my perspective, I'm excited to see it grow. Thank you. If you could give one piece of advice let's flash back to Jesse circa 18, college freshman, where everything just kind of spiraled. So you can use that as an example, or you can use the like 40-year, 40th birthday bash or anything in between. If you could give a piece of advice And obviously your story has been peppered with little mantras and nuggets throughout you sharing your journey. So I'm thinking like, maybe you're going to repeat something you already said, or maybe you're going to say something completely different, which is why I still want to ask this. If you could give, this podcast is essentially about mental health. This idea is that we as a society continue to squeeze people into extremely small and narrow boxes, which it doesn't fit. It forces us to actually compromise who we are, which in turn impacts how we think and feel about ourselves, right? It's mental health. So if you could give a piece of advice to a young adult right now, right? Jesse, circa 18, college freshman, or fast forward to 40, what advice would you give?
We're taught, we're conditioned, right, to believe that there's a certain narrative to our life, right? A lot of people are taught a very similar narrative, right? I kind of think of certain people in my life who always felt like, well, I should be married by this age, and I want to buy a house by this age, and kids at this age. And listen, that works for a lot of people, and I think it's beautiful for the people who see it that way and they find their way to that and they truly love what they have. That's not the case for everybody, but people still try to stay that course. And so, it took me 40 years to say to myself, what are you doing? Like, you've kept yourself in this dark room with walls squeezed up against you because you believed that you couldn't speak up and say you need help, or you believed that you had to have a job and buy this car and, save enough money to buy. You're doing things because this is what you're conditioned to think. Change your narrative. Look, my narrative was a massive change. It doesn't have to be a massive change. You just have to tinker with things to actually find ways to live the life that you want, or to feel or address things within yourself that you can recognize need to be addressed, right? Like, I'm constantly just saying to people, a day hike for me or a run on trail out here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, there are times I get so much out of that is very, very similar, if not even more so, what some of the things that I got out of hiking 2,200 miles on the Appalachian Trail. Because that's just making sure that if things are a little off for me, or I'm like, again, even I still do it, you still fall into these patterns and conditions that you have to just say, change it up a little bit, man. Do what you know is right for you. So my advice is always to say, regardless, it's not rebelling if you're young. If your parents tell you this is the way it's supposed to be, and you don't feel like it is, and if you feel like it's affecting you, and you certainly find like there's some things that you're struggling with, this is your life, right? It's not our parents' life. It's not like, it's no disrespect to them. I love them, but ultimately it's your life. It's your life you're living, and you have a right to do whatever you need to do to live the life that you are striving to live. So change your narrative. It goes along the same lines as far as, coming out of your chaos, but don't be afraid to take little leaps and change the narrative. I took a massive leap, but I also believe that it doesn't take a massive leap. That little leaps here and there, even if people are like, what are you doing? Who cares what people think? It's all about you. When it comes down to it, it's all about yourself and the life that you want.
There's so much that I feel like I need to internalize. Like, this interview was for me today. I needed this. So thank you.
Wow, that's super to hear. That's really super. I love hearing that. This stuff will never get old for me either. Like, it humbles the hell out of me. Like, everybody's like, oh, don't let it get to your head. I'm like, I can't. Like, it's so awesome. Like, you saw I cry, and I literally I've told this story 1,000 times, and I could never not do it without tearing up. So yeah, it's humbling,
those are like, yeah. Well, I'm gonna. So let's just transition. This has been awesome. And I think, honestly, you and I could probably sit down and just like talk about this probably for hours. Or really, I would be more like, I start the conversation and then you run with it, and I just get to sit here and listen, because that's what I feel like I've done today. I haven't even had to like ask questions, because you just like totally went there, which was awesome.
I have a marketing team now, and before you go real quick, they said to me, like, what do you think are your qualities? What are your best qualities? I said, I'm good at two things: walking and talking. You guys need to do the rest. I'm good at walking and talking.
That's a really good segue. So how do they connect with you? And then also how do they connect with Hike the Good Hike? Because in addition to just like being able to see the website or get connected to whatever it is that you're doing, like, events or
Yep.
more importantly, how do they donate? So how do we connect with Hike the Good Hike?
So that's where I'm at on all social media. I'm at Hike the Good Hike, and my website is hikethegoodhike.com. So it's as simple as can be, right? We are going through a major transition with the website and social media. Like I said, we're transitioning now from what initially was, a kind of a blogger site with photos and my writings and such. So I would just get on there and get on the mailing list, because by the end of this month, we're relaunching everything that will then be like a nonprofit driven website and social media. And once you're on that email list, or you just want to check in, maybe just follow me on Instagram, because Instagram's really where I get, in the moment news out. You can just log in there and you'll see things in my story or my page that'll kind of like let everybody know here we are. And, if you want to support, here's where you go. And, Hike the Good Hike everywhere. It's really easy. And there's a lot of great things coming up. Like I said, I'm launching a podcast, and, I really encourage people to get on board, because 2023 is going to be a massive year for the organization, and I'm putting myself out there to do everything I can. I'm taking on 2 major hikes in 2023. I'm taking on the Florida Trail, which is roughly 1,250 miles. And then 3 months later, I'm taking on the Continental Divide Trail, which is roughly 3,000 miles. So I'll be hiking for about 6 to 7 months in 2023, really just doing what I do, walking and talking and bringing a lot of attention to my organization. And by doing that, I really believe we can help a lot of people.
Yep. Well, we will have the links for all of this to drive people to connect with you. Jesse, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to sit down and chat with me today. And honestly, I just hope that we cross paths on a trail soon.
Yeah. And we can always do a part 2 down the road.
Yes. I'm holding you to it.
Yeah. I like talking. It won't take much.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. I want to thank my guests for joining me on this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. Also, put a face with a voice by accessing their interview on the newly formed successissubjective.org website. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email me at Joanna, Joanna, at successissubjective.org. I would also be remiss if I didn't tell you to check out the collegealternative.org and lilyconsulting.com websites for additional resources outside of podcasting. If you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please do me a favor and subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on any other podcast playing app, such as Audible, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Last but not least, Success is Subjective is listener supported, made possible by me and by you. You can support this podcast by joining the Patreon community at patreon.com/successissubjective. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.